The bells of Constantinople rang as they always had. For 1,000 years, they called the faithful to prayer steady, ancient, holy. But on the morning of May 29th, 1453, they weren't calling, they were screaming. Across the ancient walls, Ottoman banners fluttered like dark wings. Cannons thundered, and the city shook as if the earth itself wished to swallow it whole. Inside the city's convents, nuns knelt with rosaries in their hands. Some were old, their bodies bent from decades of prayer. Others were young, pale-faced, having never seen a battlefield or a sword. Now they heard the walls breaking. They heard voices crying. They heard their city dying. Many whispered the same words, "Lord, if this is the end, let us die in your house." Constantinople had survived 23 sieges before, but this time the enemy was different. The Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, was only 21 years old, but his ambition was absolute. He didn't just want to raid the city. He wanted to own it. His army was vast, his cannons were monstrous, and his dream was simple. Constantinople would become the heart of his new empire. The walls that had stood for 1,000 years fell in a matter of hours. And when they fell, the first places the soldiers stormed were the churches and convents. The Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in all of Christendom, had become a last refuge. Men, women, children, monks, and nuns stood shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with incense and fear. People clutched icons to their chests. They hugged their loved ones. They prayed for a miracle. They had believed that angels themselves guarded the city, but the angels did not come. Then the great bronze doors of the cathedral burst open. The soldiers entered. Prayers turned into screams. The sanctuary became a scene of chaos. People were torn from the altars they had served their whole lives, dragged away to an unknown fate. For the nuns, this was the moment they had dreaded. Rumors had spread through the convents for weeks. They knew what happened to women in war. Some prayed for mercy. Some prayed for a quick death. Some gripped the cold marble columns so hard their fingers bled, trying to hold on to the only world they had ever known. A world of silence, discipline, and devotion, and it all collapsed in a single day. Soon after the walls fell, Sultan Mehmed himself rode his horse into the Hagia Sophia. The marble floor was still wet with tears. A few priests were still chanting, desperately trying to finish the liturgy. Mehmed let the ancient words hang in the air for a heartbeat, then silenced them. He dismounted, bent down, and lifted a handful of soil from the ground. Pouring it over his head in a gesture of humility before God, he declared, "From this day, this will be a mosque." The great golden icons were covered. The thousands of candles were extinguished. The Christian chants were replaced by new prayers in a new language. The great heart of Eastern Christianity was transformed forever. Outside, in the captured city, the same story unfolded everywhere. Church after church was claimed. Monastery after monastery was emptied. The old world was being erased, stone by stone. Many of the nuns were taken into private households, as servants or slaves. Others were sold in markets and sent far away from the city. Some were eventually ransomed by European merchants and found their way to Venice or Genoa, carrying with them stories of horror and loss that would fuel conflict for generations. None of them ever returned to the quiet world of their cloisters. History rarely speaks about these women. Our books tell us about the sultans and emperors, the cannons and the armies. But in the shadows of the grand histories we celebrate were thousands of women who woke up every morning in captivity, whispering prayers in a language their captors didn't understand. Women who once walked in serene cloistered gardens now swept foreign floors. Women who once sang hymns in soaring cathedrals now hummed them in secret, just to remember. They were not rulers, not soldiers, not great figures of history, but they endured. In the hills outside the conquered city, one small convent remained hidden. The nuns there lit candles every night for those who were lost. They refused to abandon their chapel, even as Ottoman patrols passed nearby. Years passed. The new empire settled into its power. The raw pain of the conquest slowly faded into memory. A few of those nuns died in peace, buried under olive trees, their graves unmarked, their stories unheard by the wider world. Some called them foolish, others called them holy. The world moved on. Constantinople became Istanbul. Great mosques rose where churches once stood. Bustling markets grew, and caravans poured through the gates from Asia, Europe, and Africa. The empire became rich, powerful, and feared. Travelers wrote about its greatness. They recorded the names of the sultans, the generals, the viziers. They described the gold, the courts, the armies. They rarely wrote about the women who lost everything when the walls fell. Yet these women were there, silent shadows behind every gilded victory. Back in Europe, stories of the city's fall spread like wildfire. Some tales were exaggerated, some were invented, but at their core was a simple truth. The fall of Constantinople was the end of a world of ringing bells, glowing icons, sacred chants, and quiet faith. A world that had lasted for 1,000 years and ended in a single brutal day. The great bells of the city never rang again, but faith did not disappear. It changed. It hid. It survived in whispers, in tiny, hidden chapels, and in the hearts of women who refused to forget the sound of their hymns. Somewhere, even now, in an old stone church with cracked walls, a single candle might be burning. We don't know who lit it. Maybe it was a descendant of those who survived. Maybe it was someone who simply heard the story and refused to let it die. The siege of Constantinople was a battle of cannons and soldiers. But what happened afterward was a battle of memory. Empires rise and empires fall. Kings take cities, and walls can be broken. But faith, fragile, wounded, and often forgotten, has a way of surviving where armies do not. What happened in those convents was a tragedy not just of violence, but of erasure. 1,000 years of peace, prayer, and devotion swept away in a single morning. These women are almost invisible in our history books, but they were real. They breathed, they prayed, and they suffered. And in their quiet, stubborn survival, there is a truth that no conqueror can ever truly erase. Steel can break walls, but it cannot break the human spirit. And faith can outlast empires. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more journeys into the hidden corners of history.